Hopefully you had a chance to watch yesterday's three-part installment on making a violin bow. Um, One of the things that we wanted to do was just to show you the different the techniques of making a bow. And importantly for me, we decided to do this project last week. We saw in the news that the little town of Cremona, Italy, which is where Stradivari lived, is in pretty rough shape from the coronavirus. And Samaritan's Purse, a Christian organization, actually moved their mobile hospital there to help out with the dire need. And so we came up with the idea of making this bow live. And then when it's completed, we want to sell the bow and have all the proceeds go to Samaritan's Purse for helping out with that. So today what we're going to do is we're going to take this block of wood and these two pieces of silver, and we're going to try to get it to this point. So the frog has been roughed out. Basic dimensions are finished up. The sides have been scooped out and filed down, and the track is in it, and it's ready to fit, well, to put the hair track in it. So anyways, we'll get started here. So start out here so you can see I have a lot of tools that we use for the frog making. So I'm going to start by getting the frog into its basic shape here. So. This is really nice ebony that I've got actually from a local company here, and it's so precious that we try to preserve every single piece, make every single piece into a bow. Our angle down here. We're going to use our angle gauge. Get that close. Let's do a little more on this side. Okay. So now I'm going to start to hollow out the sides here a bit.
You want to tell them what kind of...
It never fails.
Never fails. There isn't even anybody on the line.
Apparently, the telemarketers are an essential business because they've been busy today.
Do you want to tell everybody what the chisel is, or the gouge is that you're using?
So this is called an in-canal gouge. It's actually got the grind bevel is on the inside instead of the outside. And that allows you to cut this relatively flat channel here.
Why would you want the bevel to be on the inside and not the outside?
It's just, if it's on the inside, then you're constantly digging in, and this way you can, like I said, you can make it nice and straight across.
Cosman said, I'm here for bow making 101.
All right.
Tony said, what make is that gouge?
This is made in the USA, and it's called Pexto, P-E-X-T-O. Pretty sure that's all that's there. you know, probably 1950s, something like that. We have this amazing store here locally called Colonial Homestead, and it's an Amish guy who buys and sells old tools, old hand tools, and you can go and find really nice vintage tools for not much money, far less than what you'd pay for a new tool. And I think a lot of times that quality of steel is maybe a little bit better than what you can buy today, certainly for the price. Okay, so we got that hollowed out a bit. And let's see here. Go ahead and get the top squared up a little bit.
Mom says she's watching us.
Uh-oh.
And
Well, that's one way to make sure we're working.
and Dennis Braun says that he's watching from Spain also.
Watching from Spain. Boy, if you're in Spain right now, I think you want to be hiding under the bed. It sounds like the coronavirus is really bad there right now.
He said he's looking forward to seeing you make a frog. He said that's the most difficult part of bow making for him. You're not alone, Dennis.
Okay, so we got that squared up a bit, so now we can go ahead and trim the side up a little bit. This is a bit challenging because I really need a lot of light to do this. So I think my big regular lamps get in the way of the camera, so we're just resorting to this little guy here. Let's see what our width is. 13.8, 13.5. Can't make it much narrower. So I'm trying to make these two sides parallel.
Dennis said he's been hiding inside. It's been raining all day, but I guess they really needed the rain.
Okay, so we got these parallel these sides parallel. It's really great if you can get the grain running along with the sides there. It just makes it so much easier to do the rest of the channeling out. So I'm going to make a scribe line here at about 1.5 millimeters on both sides. Okay, and I'm going to take my gouge, and I'm going to gouge right up to that line. Okay. This is really nice ebony. Whew, it's fun. Okay, so we're a little tall now, still. So I'm going to get these so that they're at equal angle.
You want to tell everybody how you're using the plane that way?
Yes, so what I'm doing is the blade stops here, so there's no blade here, so I'm actually rubbing part of it where there's no blade, but I'm that allows me to make it so that my this second edge here is parallel to the backside. So I can look again, see what I got.
Dennis asked, do you split out the ebony from the large log piece, aiming for perfect quartering? Pearl slide toward the outside of the log.
So I get this ebony. I can grab a piece here. So they come. These pieces come. They're foot long. Is that 30 centimeters long? Inch square ish. And so if you just split one out, and it's not perfectly straight, you waste a frog. So I try really hard to actually cut it to length, and then I take a little razor saw, literally, and saw them apart so that I can get two out of this. So this resource is super precious, and we've got to do everything we can to be quite stingy about using every bit of it. So yeah, I get these in a pack of 10, and typically 2 of those 10 pieces are just spectacular. Others are going to have some defect, knots or wavy grain. I've never seen such flamed ebony before, as I have in some of these pieces. And so, but most of them can be used for other things, violin making, nuts and saddles, and of course button blanks and so on. So we save every bit that we can. So we've got to get this angle here. So it's the same. Okay, so now I'm going to reduce the height down to the finished height of the frog. The ebony part would be 20 millimeters. So we make it a little oversized, make it 21. The width here is finish is going to be 13, so we're about a millimeter over that. And then the top where it meets the stick is going to be 8.5 millimeters, so we make it a millimeter wider than that at this point. So I'm just going to go ahead. Ooh.
Tim would like to know
Guess
what the dimension would be for a viola. How much is that different than a violin?
You can add a millimeter maybe in height, not much in the length. Maybe the ferrule would be a little bit wider. Again, part of that is it depends on the model that you're using. This piece is actually a bit tight on the height here, so okay, we're good with that. Okay, so I've got my width here done, my height is done, it's parallel on both ends, both lengthwise and this way as well. And now I'm going to reduce the width here at the top. So we'll take a little bit more material off here. Okay, same on the other side. Okay, and so we are at 9.5, so we need to take it down 1 millimeter. 0.8. Okay, we're keeping our angle there. Let's do 2 more. 1, 2, 1, 2. .7. Okay, now we're right on our mark. So I'm going to take, check that again. Oh, guess what? I should have zeroed my caliper out. Got a long way to go. We're at 10. Shit. 9. Millimeter to go. Keep checking our angle here. We're still good. Take a little bit more off the sides.
Stacy chimed in. She said, "Hi friends, thanks for doing this. I'm really enjoying it."
Yeah, thanks for posting that Instagram. That was kind of fun. Seeing me sitting on your bench. That was a little funny.
Maybe when you come to teach your classes, Stacy, we can do some videos for you. Hopefully I've figured it out by then. Cosman said, "Is there a template for the sides of the frog or whatever looks good?"
Salt to taste. Yeah, basically, the width here, if you're going to measure this here, is going to be somewhere around maybe 7.5 at the narrowest, at the narrow part here. 7.5, 8 on a violin frog. Again, it kind of depends on the style of the bow that you're doing. Okay, we got our width done here, so now I'm going to do my final gouging here.
Did you zero out first?
Yep, we're good. When I first started making bows, I didn't know anything about this tool. And I went to violin making school.
That was.
Sorry. So I didn't know anything about this gouge when I first started making bows. And so, but I was a violin maker and I had this little plane, and it turns out that it is just about the perfect curvature to hollow out the side of the frog. So
Is that the one they call a spoon?
no, it's not a spoon. It's just a finger plane.
Okay.
I still use this a lot, especially on big frogs like a bass frog. You want to have a little bit more control. It's a flatter curve maybe than this is, and And if you've got wood that tends to tear a little bit, sometimes ebony's not as much fun to gouge out here, and that's quite helpful.
Is that a St. James Bay?
No, this one actually I think is I got this from a German company called Getz. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to choose which side of the frog I like better. Sometimes when you look at the side of the frog, if there's pores, you can kind of see down into those pores because of the angle of the grain. So sometimes they're less noticeable one way or the other. Plus, if there's maybe a little color difference or just whatever you want to hide on the back side of the frog, this is the time to make the decision. So
The back side, would that be the audience side?
the audience side, yeah. Okay, I think either way here we're golden. So we're going to do this side, I think. Okay, so the length of my ferrule is 8.5 millimeters. So I'm going to scribe a line at the length of the ferrule, and then on the sides here too. Okay, then take my square and my knife. And I'm going to scribe that line. And then score it on the side. And on this side as well. Okay. And we're going to take this saw. And we're going to saw down just about a millimeter. It's about the width of the blade on this, or the height of the blade, I guess. Okay. And then I'll do the side as well, just a little bit. Okay, so that's ready. Put this away. Now I'm going to mark my height of my ferrule, which is 5.5 millimeters. And then I'm going to let's see, 5.5. It's 3.5. Okay. Then take my scribe here.
Tony said, "Love that vise."
Love that vise.
Tell him what kind of vise it is.
That's a Bully vise. It's made in Germany. It's a watchmaker's tool. And the really great thing about it is the jaw, the back jaw runs on a dovetail, so that when you close the vise can't do this. There's a similar one made by a company named Bergeron. It's a much smaller vise that does the same thing. They're both really great tools. Okay, so now we're going to drill a hole with the bow drill here.
Okay, that looks fancy.
This is an old, what's left of an old watchmaker's lathe that somebody had chopped the front part of this off. If you pan up, you can see there's one on the shelf up here. It's the same thing. Anyway, so it made it into my bow drill here. Okay, so we got a little spade bit in here, 5 millimeters.
I don't think we'll hit anybody.
Nope, I think we're good. Okay, I'm just
We did make some lathes, or bow drills, but we don't have any more, right?
I have one that I'm hanging on to for our school. So we have one for there. All right. With that for a while.
Why don't you tell everybody why we started learning trade secrets?
I taught at the VSA, Violin Society's workshops in Oberlin for almost 20 years, and we saw a real need for people who wanted to learn how to do rehairing of bows, and a lot of people couldn't do it during the summer months, or at least the month of June. And so we set up our own school, and we started here at our shop. We had started out with 4 students, and we kept getting more and more requests. And we resorted to setting it up in our garage and making that a nice place to work with 10 students, and finally we grew out of that, and so we decided to move to our own space and set up Learning Trade Secrets. So now we have other talented people like Stacy Stiles and Tom Crowan and Joe Robson,
And
Chris Germain, come and teach 1 week, narrowly focused on one subject, a week-long class, and it's been extremely popular, and it's been a lot of fun. So, hopefully after this virus thing is done, we can get back to work here, and I know we've disappointed a lot of people because we've had to cancel classes, but nothing we can do about that, unfortunately.
Jake Estefan said, "Hi, Rodney and Kate from Lebanon.
Lebanon, wow.
Question from yesterday. If it doesn't,
It's fine.
okay. What does the density of a stick mean, and what's the benefits behind a heavier and or lighter than water?"
So the density is, you know, what the whatever material you've got, what it weighs basically in water. And the way we test it is we weigh it in the air, like it's sitting on the bench here. We weigh that, and then we take it and we put a little hook on it and put it in a water tank and then weigh it in the water. And you do a simple calculation, and you come up with the what it weighs in this specific gravity. What is it? How does it compare to water? For bow making, you need to have wood that's very close to specific gravity of 1. Probably 0.97 would be really light. You might be able to make a base bow out of that. If it's and then probably 1.2 probably would be the heaviest you could use. So it's pretty much a narrow range of weights. And so if you think about it, a U.S. 1 cent, 1 penny, weighs about 2.4 grams, I think, the newer pennies with the aluminum core in them. And typically a violin bow would be 60 grams. So 58 is getting on the light side and 62 is getting on the heavy side. So it's really a very tiny amount of difference in weight, and therefore density too. So, you know, when you're making a bow, you want to have your bow look like, you don't want to make a violin bow that's the size of a cello bow, say, in dimensions. It just is aesthetically not very good, and it probably won't play very well either, because it'll just change the way the bow works. All right, so we're going to go here and scribe a line around the ferrule area at 1 millimeter.
Ed Shillito asked if we would show how to sharpen the bit for the bow drill. He thinks that's the hardest part of using it.
I can do that. In fact, I've got a little later on, I've got one of my bits I need to sharpen, or can sharpen, so we'll do that. Okay, so now I'm going to start chiseling away this area where the ferrule's going to go. I'm having a hard time seeing.
Do I need to turn off these
Nope,
other lights?
nope,
Okay.
you're good. So I'll try to go down to the line here.
Ed said thanks.
You have to be careful not to let your chisel bang into the rest of the frog there. You don't want to chip into that. All right. trusty vise out here. This is not cooperating very well. Come on, chip.
You don't use a 1/2-inch chisel for that?
I will.
Oh, okay.
I will.
Why don't you tell them about that chisel you're using?
So, frustratingly, a lot of the tools that we use aren't commercially available, and mostly because they're just specifically for the bow making community, and we're just such a small group overall that yeah, it's just not worth trying to cater to us. And a lot of people, if you train in Germany or France or here in the States or whatever, England, you're probably going to want a little bit different tools anyway, so that just makes it a little bit more difficult.
Different tools because they've learned differently?
Different tools because you've learned different techniques. Okay, so I'm going to zero this, and I want this to come down to 1 millimeter. Okay. So last year I went ahead and made up a bunch of these little chisels just because we were going to have a class in frog making at the school, and there just wasn't anywhere we could send people to buy these things. So
Are they all gone now?
they are all gone. Okay. All right, let's go close. Flatten this up a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of the center of this because it's going to go away anyways. Make it easier to file. Okay. So we've got our frog ready to fit the ferrule. I'll do one more thing here.
What are you doing?
Just cleaning up where the saw mark is here, and then I also take and remove a little bit of where the slide's going to go.
Just so it's not in the way.
Well, when you file this has to be made square right here, and nice and crisp and square. And if this is straight across, the file it doesn't want to track straight. So if you remove the center, it's only touching on 2 points instead of the whole way across. So this just makes it a little easier. Trying to get my light here so I can see what I'm doing. Pretty good. Okay, so that's ready now for us to fit the ferrule. So we're going to take these two pieces. So this is sterling silver. It's 1 millimeter thick, and it's about a millimeter wider than my finished ferrule, which is going to be 13 millimeters. And it's about a millimeter longer, so about 9.5 millimeters. And so I'm going to first take and file this flat. Okay, that's pretty good. So now that I've got that nice clean surface, I try not to touch that with my hands. Solder joints have to be clean of any oils or dirt or anything, so just touching it with just leaving a fingerprint on it may interfere with how well the solder joint goes. So now I'm going to take my design block here. Lay that over that.
Where could somebody get one of those?
This is from a company called Rio Grande. It's a big jewelry supply company. And let's go ahead and we're over bending it. So this piece was 19 millimeters long. It's that 9.5 millimeters wide, and it's a 0.5 millimeter thick. So now I'm going to take my pliers here and open this up a little bit. So I personally like to have my ferrule a little flat on the top and more rounded on the sides. And if you look at other makers' bows or old antique bows, you can kind of get an idea of what they might be doing. There's other makers that do just the absolute opposite. They're more rounded on the top and angled on the side, and it really influences the shape of your finished frog. So we're at 6 millimeters tall and 14 millimeters long. So I'm going to cut off a 0.5 millimeter on this. On the height.
Ryan Hammonds asked, is there any way you can make this less interesting? I really need to get this base bar done and it's not cutting itself.
Sorry, guy. Okay, so I'm just going to take my scissors here. Cut off 1 millimeter. Okay. So I'm at 15.7. I want to have my finished my finished width at 13. So I'm going to squeeze it up here a little bit. 6.9. I'm going to take another millimeter off. Or a half a millimeter, sorry. These tin snips, these are made by a company called Weiss, and you can take them and sharpen them. They work just as well as any scissors, and they cut silver really, really well when they're sharp. Come on.
If they're not sharp, they just kind of mush.
Okay, 0.
Sarah Bystrom said,
6.
just give in, Ryan. Convert to the bow side.
Yeah, there you go.
I know a great place where you can learn to make bows, Ryan. Just saying.
Okay, so I want my finished height to be 5.5, and my finished width to be 13, and so I try to get my shape, the curve that I want, as if this was a finished piece, and then I'll go ahead and cut off the part, the thickness of the flat of the ferrule when it's done.
Tyler said Ryan probably has Brillhart playing on the other side of his bench too.
Yeah, so there's another maker. His name is Jake Brillhart, a violin maker, and he is live streaming on Facebook, making of a violin which is going to be donated, and the Facebook address, whatever you call it,
The title of the
title
Facebook page
is Violin-Building Fundraiser for Musicians Aid. Okay, so let's cut this millimeter off.
And you can buy a raffle ticket to win this violin, and all of the proceeds go to help musicians that have lost performance gigs due to the coronavirus.
Okay, so now we can file it.
Jack Estefan said, Rodney, you're making history. I think you're the first case worldwide to decide to stream the making process from A to Z. And he even showed us how to spell your name in Arabic, which is pretty cool.
Oh, cool.
Nick Walker said, would you use the same shears for cutting the thicker silver for bass frogs?
I can cut up to about a millimeter, maybe and a quarter. Anything after that's getting, you're misshaping what you're cutting so much that it just makes sense to go ahead and saw it. Okay. So I'm gonna take that burr off. Inside and out. One more cut with a file. So that's clean now. We'll try not to touch that. And let's get all of our silver dust. I save all of my silver filings, dog hair and all sometimes, and send it off to a place called Hauser and Miller, and they melt it down and send me a check. It's kind of nice. Okay.
Or they'll give you credit.
Or
right?
credit, yeah, either way. Okay, now I'm going to use my silver solder. This is medium solder.
You're using that one and not the open grate?
I'm going to use this.
Okay.
Okay, and cut off 4 little chunks here. Sorry you can't see this. Okay, there's the
So
solder.
how did you learn to solder silver?
So when I worked for John Norwood Lee, he had a guy named Jim Marin who worked for him that was building frogs, building parts of frogs, and he was a jeweler. And basically this is the way I've learned how to do it. I've also had a friend who was looking for my scribe point, I guess I'll use this one, was a dentist, and he made his own bridges, dental bridges. And I was really frustrated with the flux that I was using, and he says, oh, just get some borax and mix it in some Vaseline, and it makes a nice paste flux. And I thought it was crazy, because you would think, well, you know, you're trying to keep it clean so you don't get any grease in it, and now you're putting grease in it. And so I tried it, and probably been using it for over 20 years. It works fabulously. So I'm just putting flux, and basically what flux does is it keeps the oxygen away from the joint and keeps the surface clean, so that the silver will flow and make the joint. So if I can hold on to these little pieces of solder here, I just stack my parts together. One of those little pieces of solder just disappeared somewhere. Let's cut another one.
Umberto asked if we're using sterling silver.
Sterling silver.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, now I'm going to put a little flux on this part.
Nick asked if there's a specific ratio of borax to Vaseline.
You just want to get the consistency of, a paste, like a toothpaste, something like that. Okay, so I've got the ferrule built, flat part on the bottom, solder, the flux, the solder on top of it, and then the round part on top of that. So sort of the traditional way of doing this is to wire it, put the two pieces together and take either stainless wire or iron wire and tie it together so it can't move, and then use a torch from there to do that. So I'm going to do something here a little bit different. I've been having a lot of fun with my really old-fashioned torch here.
Florian asked, is there a reason not to cover all of the silver with flux?
The solder will only go where there's flux. So don't put flux where you don't want the solder to go to. So I won't be able to talk when I'm doing this. So here we go. Can you zoom way in, Kate?
Yeah, I can try.
Okay. Check and make sure it's flowed all the way around. This is lime away, and it will the borax will turn into like a glass-like material, which is really hard on your tools. And so if you use the borax or the lime away, it'll make that go away. Oops, and the water. Okay.
Cosman asked, is that an alcohol lamp or something that burns hotter?
It's an alcohol lamp. I actually saw a jeweler, a video of a jeweler in India soldering exactly this way, and he just had like it was like a little bowl of oil and a wide wick like out of oil lamp, and that's all he was using for his heat. It was pretty amazing.
Tyler asked if you could talk about the difference in soldering nickel, silver, and gold.
Nickel, you're still going to use silver solder. Gold is a little bit more challenging. Some people like it actually better than doing silver, but you've got to be, you know, the saying, cleanliness is next to godliness, and boy, it's couldn't be truer when it came to soldering, especially gold. Okay, so got a nice bead of solder. You can see the solder has made a fillet on both inside and outside. So I'm going to...
Nick asked what the name of the blowing tool was.
Blowpipe, jeweler's blowpipe. A little glass in there, a little... Stay. Okay, so now I'm going to take a little half-round file and crisp up these edges a little bit inside. Don't want to file away all of the solder. Okay. Clean up my filings here. Now I'm going to take my mandrel, my hammer. So because we've heated this up, we've softened the silver. So we want to make the bottom, the flat part of the ferrule hard, so it doesn't bend so much when you put the spread wedge in. They do eventually anyways, but this sort of helps with that. So. Okay.
Tim asked what the thickness is for the top of the ferrule.
Millimeter for the flat, 1/2 millimeter for the round. Okay, got that out of here. Get these tools out of the way.
So we are now at 1 hour. Do you want to take a break and come back?
Yeah, let's take a 15-minute break here. It's going to take a while to get this ferrule fit.
Okay. We'll be
Okay.
back in 15 minutes.
15
We'll
minutes.
see you at 1:15.